Welcome to Biteside. I'm Seamus Byrne. This week I'm talking to Navid Khavari, Narrative Director on Far Cry 6. The game is now out and it is a fun romp in a fictional Caribbean nation. But what I really liked about my time at the game is some of the really cool sort of narrative elements. And so I was really excited to talk to Navid about that. We talk about the acting performances, about trying to instill some heart into a game that is ultimately about going crazy with weird and wonderful weaponry in a fascinating place. So here's my chat with Navid Khavari, Narrative Director of Far Cry 6. In the hands-on session, the big thing that jumped out that I think would be great to talk about is, how you feel like you put the heart in the right place, because there was a lot of kind of subtleties about the interactions with the characters and things that did feel really good. Like, that there's plenty of times in games where you sort of go, I'll forgive it because it's a game, so the storytelling could probably be better or the scripting could probably be better, but it felt really compelling. And
I
even
appreciate you saying that.
And like the casual interactions with the characters in the different hubs was really cool. So what was the way that you tried to think about that idea of, I guess, so quickly building the connections between characters?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, thank you for saying that and warming my heart right off the bat here. I think the main thing when we started was we wanted this to be an absolutely epic story. So a revolution, by definition, needs to feel epic. But also, when you're telling a story about revolution, it means it needs to be character driven. These are people with their own opinions and beliefs and ideologies, and they need to feel real and natural. And that actually started right from the get-go. Was we wanted to make sure that no matter who the character is, they still have a heart. Whether they're a villain or a hero, they still have they have a heart and a heartbeat, and you need to find the pulse. And I think the main thing is that also comes from studying revolution itself. We like to think of guerrillas and revolutionaries as sort of one homogenous group, black and white, two sides fighting each other, where if you peel back the onion a little bit, they're filled with different opinions and belief systems and factions fighting for who should be in charge and that kind of thing. And so we wanted to sort of pull back the curtain a bit and show those dynamics in full display, because for every single person, they have their own reasons for fighting the revolution, whether it's for family, for pride, for the flag, or to shoot guns. That's also something. So that was very important for us to try and capture.
You've mentioned in other interviews that you did work with like historic revolutionaries at the time, or at least you interviewed some of them, or kind of looked into some of those histories. Can you sort of talk a little bit about that kind of background research?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a very long period of research. We spoke to we did have a research trip, for example, to Cuba, where we did speak to revolutionaries and heard their stories and were inspired by them. We also spoke to revolutionary fighters who will remain nameless that are not from Cuba and were part of other events throughout history. And at the same time, it was incredibly important to myself and the team that, when we were setting out to make this game, it wasn't like we would have one check at the end of authenticity and representation and diversity and inclusion, but rather that we would have multiple gates and checks throughout production, and also not with one person, with different, because it's not like one person can hit a check mark and say everything's right. So we did it with historians. We did it with we had a professor from Tulane University, Ana Lopez, who was fantastic. fantastic. We brought on actually. Two writers who are Latinx, and at the same time we spoke to, like you were saying, revolutionaries. So really, it was trying to build as broad a sort of sensitivity check as we could, and thus make it feel natural and real. And I'm so thankful we did it, because I think when you play the game, you feel the sense that it's fun, it's crazy, it's Far Cry, but there is a sense that some of these conversations did take place at some point in history, and this feels real. So that's my hope anyway.
There's even sort of some of the sequences that I really enjoyed, and not giving anything away, but there's characters you haven't seen yet, but you start interacting with them over like a comms headset, sort of a setup, and even in those kinds of moments, there's some lovely playfulness attached to the conversation, but that also does feel like it's it speaks to these people have been through an awful lot, and they're just whether it's they're kind of enjoying themselves at this stage in their life, but also, okay, well, we've got to convince them to get back in the fight, all those kinds of interesting sort of elements to it. But, how do you approach trying to build those kinds of moments where clearly, you're genuinely in the thick of playing the game in that process, but that you've kind of got this nice little lead in, so that even before you then stand in front of this character, that you already have this kind of cool sense of who they might be?
Well, those are actually some of the trickiest lines to write, because you don't want to detract from the moment-to-moment gameplay, right? But at the same time, you want to each line should have a bit of meaning attached to it. So I think it comes down to a little bit of what I was saying before of there's no wasted dialogue. If someone's gonna speak to you over the radio, there needs to be an intent and purpose around it. And really, what we tried to do is, in a lot of ways, I talked about this, and I don't know if it makes sense, even as I'm saying it, but democratize our tools, as opposed to having, 10-minute cinematics, for example, chop it up, spread it out through the characters in the world, instead of and give them some room to shine, whether it's in VO or in cinematics. And we talk a lot about the villain, Anton, as we're doing these sort of press events, as we should. We spent a hell of a lot of time trying to nail the villain. But what I always tried to do is, and maybe it's I live in a perpetual underdog state, was I wanted the heroes, I wanted the revolutionaries to stand toe to toe. That's what I'm hoping is the secret weapon when people play Far Cry 6 is they'll love Giancarlo's performance, they'll love Anton, but they'll stay for the revolutionaries.
And how much space do you create when you're working with performers like Giancarlo Esposito? Because again, I'm sure you need the script to be pretty tight for the way it might flow, but right. But all of those performances across sort of all the different characters that I have interacted with so far, felt really great, and it kind of felt like that they had room to really perform.
Yeah, that's a philosophy thing. Again, speaking to someone else about this, we really tried to structure the narrative process around television, where we had a series of writers' rooms, and we worked through story, pitching ideas against the wall, writing scripts, going through the scripts, debating over coffee and rage about them, and then moving into shooting. there was, I kind of took on a bit of a showrunner in television. You'd have a showrunner on set. And then we had an amazing cinematics director, Grant Harvey, who has, 30 years in film and TV. And we just worked together with the actors, and stepped through the scripts. And much to, everyone's chagrin, if that's the right way to say the word, I'm a firm believer in until the actor says it, it's not final. Because if they're saying the line and it feels like there's marbles in their mouth, because I went off on a poetic Jack Kerouac streak or something, and this was going to be Hamlet. I try not to treat any of it precious, and our writers as well were the same way if they were on set or in the VO booth. So that was the philosophy. And I think, folks like, not to get long-winded, but folks like Giancarlo really enjoyed that. For example, we were shooting Anton for, I think it was about 2 weeks, 2-week stretch. And me and him had a conversation about what Anton's thoughts on architecture might be. And so that night I was sort of inspired, and I wrote a minute and a half scene just based around that, and then we shot it the next day. Awesome. And I had to think of budget, keep it simple. It's a scene. You'll know. I'll just tease. It's a scene around a table, but that was the kind of fluidity that I think leads to surprises, and I hope that's what folks find when they play.
I mean, there's a scene on the boat sort of near the start that just, I felt like it sells so many of the characters and what the motivations are going to be through the rest of the game so well. And it's all about those actors. Are you
talking about the boat ride, or are you talking about the boat the boat ride on?
Yeah, right.
I'm curious.
As you're escaping the boat ride that gets yes, and someone turns up and take someone away.
Yes, exactly. Well, I think that's in the trailer, but yes, sorry.
That's good. Yeah, I'm being super careful.
Curiosity.
Look, so I think Ubisoft over the years, the whole politics thing has always been famously sort of shifting, but you've really planted a flag in this discussion. How do you feel like, you've done your best to kind of represent that idea that a game can be powerful, political, really speak to some truths, and still be a great game?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was a little bit, I've tried to be sort of candid about this. I was a little bit caught off guard. I'd done an interview that had sort of cut off a quote that I'd given, and it made it seem like, I said our games, this game isn't political, which it absolutely is. So that's sort of where the statement came from. And to me, it's just a given. So I never really actually stopped to think about it as, whether we're political or not. I think, I said it in my statement that, a revolution story is political, and you can go even by further extension, any art or anything you put into the world will have a political slant. It just depends, what are you trying to say? And I think this game will tackle, the rise of fascism that we've seen, in the last few years around the world. It will talk about LGBTQ plus rights. It will talk about the effects of imperialism and how much responsibility does Anton have, as opposed to the rest of the world have, for the situation that Yara is in. So that's without not getting into too many spoilers. But I think for me, we just wrote the story that felt right. And we weren't challenged on that at any point during the production. So, whatever comes out and the way people see it, I don't have an excuse to say, well, I wasn't able to tell the story we wanted to tell. It's not that at all. We told a political story, and we'll see how people feel about it.
Yeah. And it sounds like getting the right people in the room, helps to give it the, that it isn't, random dudes a long way away just making up a story.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where our authenticity experts shone.
Yeah.
They helped us cover our blind spots. I'm not here to say we did it right. You know, that's not for me to say, but we tried. And I think hopefully folks feel that when they play. Yeah.
And so as a wrapping up point, when you think of Far Cry as always as a series, it's about creating these kind of big open spaces to explore. When it comes to almost like in that early phase, I mean, how do you try to drop cute little narrative bombs all over this amazingly wide open space? Apart from the core story, there's always that nice thing where you might bump into other little interesting story moments around the place.
We had sort of a philosophy that we didn't like using the word side mission. I tried to banish that as much as I could from our minds. We just the way we approached it was, there's our campaign, there's our the fight against the revolution, but there's also going to be characters that are living in their own sort of bubble. But no matter who you meet in Far Cry 6, even if they don't have an opinion on the revolution, they still exist in the context of a revolution. If you kind of, not to get all esoteric or philosophical about it, but and so I think that actually that philosophy sort of helped. There's, it gave room for the writers to play and have fun, and our LDs and our artists to sort of branch away and do their own thing, but it still feels like it's part of Yara. It still feels like you're in this singular experience. So it's very difficult to explain until someone's actually played, but hopefully you know what I mean with the brief glimpse you got.
Yeah, that's awesome. Look, Navid, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Oh, this was great. Thank you. Those are great questions. I appreciate it.